For a long time, Central Asian history, I think, has been undervalued, at least undercovered. So you take your typical Asian history class in college, and Central Asia, if it gets mentioned at all, will only get very brief mention, and then usually during your discussion about the Silk Road. Now, the Silk Road deserves a lot of mention. Central Asia's role as a conduit of cultures and ideas and commodities. And this is really, really important stuff. But Central Asia is more than the Silk Route. Central Asia has also been a conduit of peoples. Time and time again, Central Asian peoples are bringing down empire after empire, state after state, in China, in India, in West Asia, in Eastern Europe, even in North Africa. And not just taking down empires, but founding them and founding states all over Eurasia. Now, this phenomenon is demonstrated right here. I'm in the Fergana Valley, where in 1483, a child named Zahir al-Din Muhammad was born. Later in his life, he'll be best known as Babur. Now, many of you are probably familiar with Babur. He's best known, of course, as the founder of perhaps India's greatest dynasty ever, that of the Mughals. And it's true. In the 1520s, Babur, with a relatively small army, swept into northwest India and took down the mighty Delhi Sultanate, the Lodhis. That's all true. Within a couple generations, the dynasty that he'd founded had grown into a mighty empire that controlled much of South Asia. All true. But where did Babur come from? Well, he came from Central Asia. He came from right here, literally, right here. And he brought with him, like many before him, into India, Central Asian ideas, Central Asian attitudes, Central Asian language, Central Asian custom. He was Central Asian. So who was Babur before the Indian conquest? Who was Babur the Central Asian? Well, lucky for us, Babur actually wrote his memoirs down, like the Baburnama. And the Baburnama actually makes for some pretty good reading because he's candid, he's very candid, which is not very characteristic of your traditional writer in the Muslim world. But in any case, Babur describes the Fergana Valley with great love and longing, with its, mountains ringing the valley on three sides, its abundant grain, its delicious fruit, of course, its fat pheasants. In fact, he speaks of Osh in particular as having a fine climate, an abundance of running waters, and a most beautiful spring season, a place where many traditions were cultivated due to the town's, what he calls, excellencies. He speaks of its beautiful flowers. He speaks of its rich orchards. In fact, he mentions this very mountain, the mountain I'm standing on, as providing an excellent vantage point upon the town itself. He even built a balcony, a stone balcony up here. It's still here. People visit it as a pilgrimage site. It's called the Dome Babura. So to this day, it survives, the Dome Babura, the balcony that Babur built so that he could better view the entire town of Osh. He was pretty excited about it. For climate and for pleasantness, he wrote, no township in all Fergana equals Osh. It didn't hurt that the taxes he could glean from the people who lived in the Fergana Valley could maintain a court and army of 3,000 or 4,000 men. Well, at age 11, Babur inherited the Fergana Valley from his father. 11 years old. His rule was anything but secure. Not only was he young, obviously, but he was also a Timurid prince. Prince of the House of Timur, okay, the great conqueror, Tamerlane of generations past. But he wasn't the only one. There were many male successors to the Timurid legacy, and they all considered themselves rulers by birth. And they all considered themselves legitimate heirs of the entire Timurid empire of ages past. And so you can imagine there's quite a bit of fighting amongst these Timurid princes, and Babur obviously is not immune, and he's 11 years old when he takes the throne. He was also, by the way, a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. So maybe empire building, infighting was in his blood. And for a while, Babur was a rising star. I mean, at age 15 or thereabouts, he takes Samarkand with his army. Samarkand, the great capital, the one-time capital of Timur, Timur's great empire. So this is a city with great prestige. This is a city that Babur's own father had spent much of his life trying to take, and Babur at age 15 is able to achieve it. This is one of his great achievements in his eyes. Throughout his life, he'd be obsessed with Samarkand. Unfortunately for him, he didn't have much time to celebrate. I think he held it for like 100 days. Back in Fergana, back here, a rebellion of sorts broke out. Sort of a nobility rebellion. The nobility placed on the throne Babur's brother instead. So he'd been replaced in Fergana. So of course, what does he do? He marches out of Samarkand back here to try and win his beloved valley back. And while he's marching, an enemy takes Samarkand from him. So just like that, he went from Lord of Samarkand and Fergana to Lord of nothing. Of course, he's still got his army, but he's caught between Fergana and Samarkand, and he doesn't control either one. And Babur didn't give up quite that easily, obviously. I mentioned his obsession with Samarkand, so obviously he's going to try and take it again. Which he does. He tries again a couple years later, but he's defeated ultimately by the great Uzbek champion, Muhammad Shaybani. Now, Muhammad Shaybani is sort of going to become his life nemesis. But in any case, he can't take Samarkand, so he turns what's left of his army east to Fergana, here, to this valley, to retake it. But he fails there too. And when it's all over, he has a bare bones version of his old army. Really a small band is all that's left. And he's become an outcast prince, a wanderer, taking refuge in villages and among pastoral communities in the hills and mountains of Central Asia. Now, he's humiliated, but he's active. He's active recruiting a new army. And by the time he's done, he does indeed have an army, and he directs it south to Afghanistan, where he's able to conquer Kabul and environs and build for himself a little kingdom there. Meanwhile, Muhammad Shaybani, the Uzbek, is taking over much of Central Asia, even threatening Kabul, where Babur is. So Babur has not been able to escape Muhammad Shaybani. He's taking down one Timurid prince after another until Shaybani's taken them all down except for Babur. Babur is the only Timurid prince left on a throne. Think about that. Well, ultimately, it's not Babur, but it's Ismail I. It's the newly arisen Persian Empire, the Safavid Empire, that takes down Muhammad Shaybani for Babur, and the Uzbek is killed. And together, the Safavids and Babur carve out stakes in Central Asia. And it looks like things are going Babur's way again. He's able to take Samarkand again. He's able to take Bukhara even. But it's not to last. The Uzbeks aren't done. Even without Muhammad Shaybani, the Uzbeks are able to drive Babur out back to Kabul. So this is the third time he's fought for Samarkand. And of course, for a while he was successful. But it would be the last time he would do so. Once again, losing it at the hands of the Uzbeks. Now, Babur, he'd raided India before, but now he looked on India not only as a potential raiding ground, but as a potential refuge. See, this is a detail about the genesis of the Mughals that is often overlooked. Babur looked on India as a place where he could find refuge from the Uzbek onslaught. He had to get away from those dang Uzbeks. And so, for several years, he and his armies invaded India and chipping away at local power structures in northern India, northwest India. By the way, he also, as a Timurid prince, felt entitled to northwest India, at least to the Punjab. These are areas that Timur himself had conquered and incorporated into his empire. So naturally, they belonged to him. And so all these factors come together, and finally, in 1526, lead to Babur being there at Panipat with his relatively small army against the army of the Delhi Sultanate, the Lodhis, their 100,000-man army with their war elephants and everything else. And the Delhi Sultanate falls, and a new chapter, the Mughal chapter, has dawned in Indian history. And you know the rest. Central Asia had struck again.